Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Overwatch Weekly. Not a whole lot to talk about this week. Um, Relatively slow news week because obviously BlizzCon still pretty recent, and Overwatch 2 development is pretty dark. I'm not saying a lot about it, but we did get a big PTR patch as well as some Game Informer coverage. So I'm going to talk about all that here, at least the stuff that I have and I find the most interesting. So we're going to start with this PTR patch. It is the PTR patch that they have been teasing for a little while, and we now have it, and we can talk about it. So the first thing is the introduction of the While You Wait feature. Coming with this patch, we will be removing the current skirmish feature that allowed you to spar while waiting to start a game and replacing it with a brand new option called While You Wait. When in queue, players will now be prompted to pick, if they want to, between the following game modes. Practice range, which is now available to be entered as a group. Skirmish, the same way it was before, where you can spar freely with other players without keeping track of score. Deathmatch, where you compete for the top place on the scoreboard. And custom game, where you pick a custom game from the custom game browser or create your own game mode. And they also note the custom game will now have to have the new setting allow players who are matchmaking available in order to be selected. And of course, the While You Wait game modes are all optional and can be accessed by a single player or as a group. Only the group leader can decide which mode to pick. I really like this. I think it's a good way to make queue times not as bad. I always struggle with some queue times. Though my queue times don't typically get that long. I play a lot of tank and support who don't get like long queue times, and I'm at a rank where there's a lot of people, so I don't get super long queue times. The longest I've ever gotten, I think, is like 15 minutes, which is long, but compared to what a lot of other people have gotten, it is nothing. So that is that. There's some workshop updates, which have to do with game modes and the ability to do matchmaking. That's really all they are. And you can now have stuff from the practice range, it looks like, which is pretty cool. Let's move on to the big stuff, the juicy stuff. We got the hero updates. We got a lot of them. The first one is a general update. Armor damage reduction was increased from 3 to 5. So that's a reversion of the nerf that they made several months ago now. I don't remember how long ago it was at this point in time. But now the heroes with armor will have better damage reduction as a result. And there's a lot of stuff that was done with armor and shields in this update. So let's jump into all that. So we have Orisa, who had a general update where her base armor was increased from 200 to 250. I don't know if they added 50 health to her, or they added 50 shields to her, or 50 armor to her. I can't even talk. If they added 50 armor, or if they took away 50 health and changed it to armor. I'm not positive, but it looks to me like they just added 50 armor on top of what she already had. Didn't take anything away. Fusion Driver's movement speed penalty was reduced from 30% to 20%. The protective barrier health was reduced from 900 to 600, and Fortify's cooldown was decreased from 10 seconds to 8 seconds. Sigma, his experimental barrier health was reduced from 1500 to 900. Barrier health regeneration rate was reduced from 150 to 120 health per second, and Kinetic Grasp's cooldown was reduced from 13 seconds to 10 seconds, and the damage to shield gain ratio was increased from 40% to 60%. Reinhardt's barrier field health was reduced from 2,000 to 1,600. The movement speed penalty was reduced from 50% to 25%, and the his steadfast passive ability knockback resistance was increased from 30% to 50%. And with these three, they kind of lump them all together with one developer comment. The above changes to armor, Orisa, Sigma, and Reinhardt are aimed at decreasing the overall amount of time. That's a typo. Overall amount of time players spend damaging barriers while improving the individual heroes in other areas. This is a significant change to the pace of the game, and we'll be monitoring these heroes closely to ensure that they retain impactful gameplay in that tank role. So as you can see, the main thing that they did here, obviously, is cut back on barriers, but not on armor. Make armor stronger so that the heroes are still tanky while not having this super overpowered and super kind of punishing barrier that just made the game not fun to play. Made heroes like Widowmaker pretty much impossible to play. Made heroes like Hanzo pretty much impossible to play, though not to the same extent as Widowmaker. It made some of these heroes just not really viable because there's so many barriers you're shooting through, and it was just not fun. So now, it's not really a problem. And the game's speed is meant to kind of be improved as well. You know, Orisa's fusion driver movement speed penalty had already been reduced once, and she felt a lot faster. Now she feels even faster when she's shooting, because she's not slowed down as much. Reinhardt is faster when he has his barrier up. He's 25% faster. I mean, it's going to be really fast, I think, the way the game's going to be moving. Heroes get to stay tanky without having the same amount of barriers. I think that'll be hopefully very nice and helpful for the game. It may not be very helpful. I don't know. It seems like it should help, though. I haven't really watched any pugs or anything like that, so I don't really know what's going on, but we'll find out. Moira's Biotic Grasp healing was reduced from 4 to 3.25, which is 80 healing per second to 65 healing per second. To which the comment was, Moira's primary heal is proven to be too potent, largely due to its ability to heal multiple targets. D.Va's defense matrix cooldown was decreased from 2 seconds to 1.5 seconds. Dev comment on that one, which with roll locks in place, there was some room to improve D.Va's impact as a tank, so we're partially reverting a previous change which increased defense matrix cooldown, which just makes D.Va feel a little nicer to play. Defense matrix has always been an ability about like skill. I don't think that the defense matrix cooldown was ever really a problem, because at the end of the day, it's still an ability about how you use it. You still have to manage the cooldown on like the charge on it. So it's always been that way. So I don't really think that defense matrix having a 2-second cooldown as opposed to a 1-second cooldown was ever like a super necessary thing. But they chose it anyway. But I think that it's an ability that takes a lot of skill to learn how to use and a lot of management to use already anyway. And that 2-second cooldown just kind of took away one of D.Va's main jobs. And I mean, I think 1.5 is a perfect place for it to be. I think 1 isn't necessarily the perfect place for it to be. I think that's still a little too often. But 1.5 I think is pretty good. So I think this will be a good change. Widowmaker's grappling hook cooldown was increased from 10 to 12 seconds. And that's a change mainly because barriers are not going to be as dangerous, so we got to take away some of Widowmaker's really strong movement, because she would be super powerful if the barriers weren't that good. Torbjorn's overload cooldown was decreased from 12 to 10 seconds. So this way he can, be a little more reliable. Genji's shuriken ammo is increased from 24 to 30, which is nice. That's a nice quality of life change, I guess, for Genji. It's not like a huge change, but it gives him more ability to finish off targets as heroes get stronger. The final hero change is Zarya's particle cannon secondary fire. The explosion radius was increased from 2 to 2.5 meters, and the ammo cost was decreased from 25 to 20. To which they say Zarya's overall damage output is in a good spot, but the secondary fire was left feeling a little too weak after the last set of changes. So those are all the hero changes. I think this patch should do a lot to change the way the meta is played, at least somewhat. It may not change everything, but I think it should change enough that the game becomes more exciting and more fun to play than where we've seen it in the past. So I think this is a really good change. And I'm excited to see how it changes the way the game is played. I haven't played it yet on the PTR. I've been a little too busy to do that. But I would like to take a look at some point to see what it is looking like. But let's talk about the next story, which is about a video that Jeff Kaplan did with Game Informer. It was 110 rapid-fire questions. I'm not going to give every answer and every question. The treatment of giving you information about it. If you want to watch the video, I recommend it in the description down below. There's some interesting stuff in there. There's some jokey stuff in there. It is what it is. But if you want to check it out, as always, link are in the description down below. But I'm going to run through the things that I found to be the most interesting. The story for Overwatch 2 is set about 1 year after the recall. And then in the overall scheme of things, the game takes place about 60 years in the future. I don't know if you'd ever gotten like a full confirmation about when it's supposed to take place in the future, but it takes place roughly 60 years in the future. Jeff Kaplan, if he could choose any Overwatch hero to appear in Smash, he would pick Tracer. And if he could pick any Smash fighter to be in Overwatch, he would pick Link. When asked about if players could expect to see stuff like Retribution and Uprising in the Overwatch 2 game, he said that they are going to try to tie the Archives events into Overwatch 2 in some capacity to make them available to players in some way. When asked about Echo, Jeff said that players will, quote, learn a lot more about her in the road leading up to Overwatch 2. The team has discussed the ability to add custom communication options or custom communication things. Players will be able to add them, so instead of just like having the same ones, you could add like a back to the payload or push up, something like that, whatever you wanted to do. Jeff clarified a little bit more about the difference between Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2 in terms of cosmetics and how Overwatch 1 players will see the game versus Overwatch 2 players will see the game. Jeff said that Overwatch 1 players will be able to see Overwatch 2's cosmetics and updated looks, but they won't be able to use them. So they'll be able to see the new Lucio, they'll be able to see the new Genji, they'll be able to see the new Mercy, but they won't be able to actually use them themselves unless they have Overwatch 2. He went into detail on some new Null Sector Omnic types. There's Orbiters, there are Skirmishers, and there are Obliterators, to name a few, which are all just new types of Omnics that will be seen in the story missions. An interesting question. Jeff was asked if any of the members of the Shimada family ever considered using a gun. Jeff said, quote, more than whether or not they use a gun is, who are the other members of that family? Now, we know, of course, about Sojiro, who is their father. We don't know what he looks like or anything about him. We just know that their father is Sojiro. We don't know if they have any other siblings. We don't know if they have a mother who's super involved in things. We have no idea. We can theorize and we can speculate, but we have no idea. So we'll have to find out. The final thing that was talked about that I found to be interesting was that Jeff confirmed that vehicles are not a planned feature for Overwatch 2, but he won't say that it is impossible. So as I said, if you want to see the full video, link is in the description down below. It was pretty interesting. There's some fun stuff in there, but overall, I would say it's not the most necessary watch, but I found it interesting. So if you want to check it out, I would recommend that. Next, another thing coming from Game Informer is details on an unannounced Overwatch 2 hero. This is a short article. I'm going to read most of it to you, but I just want to kind of talk about what's going on here. This is once again Game Informer. This is by Andrew Rayner, who was able to visit the Blizzard offices and kind of get a look at a bunch of Overwatch 2 related stuff for their recent Blizzard issue of Game Informer. And he talks about some stuff. So I wanted to go into it and explain the stuff that he said. So here is the article. All of Overwatch 1's heroes are coming back for Overwatch 2. As you read this, Blizzard is updating their looks for the new game. When I visited the development team in early October, they had 13 updated hero designs, with Doomfist being the last to go through the process. As the classic characters' appearances are altered, Blizzard is also working on new heroes. We know that Sojourn will be a playable hero when Overwatch 2 hits. There's a good chance Echo will be too, but Blizzard doesn't want to say whether she is or not. Whenever I asked them about Echo, they used the word mysterious to describe her. During my visit, game director Jeff Kaplan quickly walked me through a PowerPoint presentation that showed off Overwatch 2's new content. One of the slides he brought up was for new heroes. The image contained 4 silhouettes. None were immediately recognizable as characters that were teased in earlier concept arts, comic books, or any of the art we've seen. From what I could make out, 3 of the forms were female. This is just a guess, mind you, as the garments they wore made it difficult to know for sure. The character I believed to be a male held a crooked staff, looking somewhat like a wizard, warlock, or voodoo priest. So I'm going to stop right here and say this is some interesting stuff here. 4 heroes who we have never seen before, potentially, is very cool, but also, that's also something to take with a grain of salt, because they are new designs. They could be an updated look for the characters we've seen in different forms of content. You know, a hero may look different because they have changed in the year since we would have seen them last, or even longer since we would have seen them last, so we don't actually know what to make from all that. But it's possible that it is someone we know, and it's just a look we haven't seen yet. The hero that stood out the most, and I couldn't take my eyes off of, appeared to be a female with short hair. At her side and standing up to her knees was a fuzzy little critter with pointy ears and an equally pointy tail. It looked like a fennec fox, but with longer ears and a more aggressive stance. The hero of note wielded a giant 4-sided weapon, which is somewhat similar to the shuriken used by Yuffie in Final Fantasy VII, but much thicker. At first glance, this weapon looks like it's used for melee purposes, but given Overwatch is a science fiction universe, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of it being thrown like a boomerang, or attached to some kind of chain, which I didn't see. Regarding the animal, your guess is as good as mine, whether it will be on the battlefield or not. There's a chance it could be summoned in like Bob for an ultimate, or not be used at all like Bastion's bird Ganymede. Given how prominent it was in the artwork, I get the feeling this animal is used in some way. Imagine being able to tell it who to attack or pin down just by aiming at the foe. Again, this is all speculation, but from the silhouette alone, this looks to be one of the wildest heroes for the game yet. I'm going to make a wild speculation here, and say that could be the Junker Queen. I think it's possible. Short hair, melee weapon. That seems like something you could see out of the Junker Queen. Whether or not the Junker Queen would have an animal with her, I don't know. If it is her, it wouldn't be an Omnic animal, and this doesn't sound like it's an Omnic animal. So that would be an interesting hero. That hero has me very excited. I would love to see what this hero is, because I think that sounds really, really cool. Final part of this article is, given how quickly Kaplan moved from this slide to another, I didn't get good looks at the other 2 characters, but they didn't stand out like the other 2. I asked Kaplan if he could give me one word to describe any of the new heroes, and he responded with a quick no. Blizzard doesn't want to talk about them yet, but I did get a rare look at 4 that will be coming to Overwatch 2, either when it launches or later down the line. Which I thought this was very interesting. We got at least a little idea about a potential new hero coming up, even if it's just from a little silhouette. I think that's very, very cool. The last thing is a video that Michael Chu did talking about Overwatch 2's story. It's a short video. I'm just going to link it in the description. I'm not going to talk about it here, but I thought I would talk about it just a little bit and mention it and bring it up because it's a very interesting watch, because he just kind of explains the world of Overwatch 2 and the fact that it's like a diverse future, a bright future as opposed to like a bleak future, and that is why he likes the world they've built. But those are all the stories I have for you this week. This video somehow ended up being pretty long for not a lot of stories to cover, but that is what it is. If you enjoyed and you want more stuff like this, consider liking and subscribing. Comment down below your thoughts on anything that I talked about this week. But I'm going to get out of here for now. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.